Thank you for joining SEARAC's community call, Protecting Southeast Asian Immigrant Families, Fighting for Our Rights to Live and Thrive in America. For those of you not familiar with SEARAC, we are a national civil rights organization that empowers Cambodian, Laotian, and Vietnamese American communities to create a socially just and equitable society. And as representatives of the largest refugee community ever settled in the United States, SEARAC stands together with other refugee communities, communities of color, and social justice movements in pursuit of social equity. My name is Monica Spate. I'm SEARAC's Field Director, and today I am co-facilitating this webinar with my colleague Katrina, our Immigration and Policy Manager, and Suvan, our Education Policy Associate. So before we hop into this webinar, in this call, I wanted to start with a few logistics. First, due to the volume of attendees on this webinar, all participants will be placed on mute. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, you must be logged onto the webinar. And you can feel free to ask questions or make comments during the webinar, and we'll address them at the end during our Q&A session. And finally, if you would like to make a comment, we have a screenshot here of how that happens. So just look for that control panel on the left, type your question or comment in the questions section, and direct them to the webinar organizer, and we'll take care of that again during the question and answer period. So let's get started. Let's talk about what our objective here today is. Well, today we're going to share some information about the federal government's proposal to make some policy changes around public charge, and it will impact access to public benefits and really limit family-based immigration. So today our objectives are to help give you current information around public charge and how it's assessed. We're going to share how the proposed regulation may affect the assessment, how public charge is assessed, and how this is going to impact our communities. And finally, we're going to talk about how we can take action for our families. And finally, we're going to answer those questions that you may have. And so to get us started, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Katrina, to go into understanding public charge.
Hi, everyone. This is Katrina, SEARAC's Immigration Policy Manager. Before we get started, we had a few poll questions. We've been having a few technical difficulties, though, but let me try to bring it up on your screen. So for our first poll question, we'd like to ask, do you know what public charge means? Just 1 second, and I'll try to bring it up. So you should see it popping up on your screen. Oh, here we go. You know what? I think we're having technical difficulties. We might have to cut. We apologize for this inconvenience, folks. Let's just proceed with the presentation for today. Understanding public charge. In this webinar, we're going to go over regulations currently being proposed by the Trump administration that would undermine the ability of immigrants to access critical government-funded health and education programs. This so-called public charge regulation is being closely monitored by SEARAC and many other immigration, health, and education advocates whose communities will be heavily impacted. Public charge is a term used to identify an immigrant who the government believes is likely to become dependent on government assistance to live in the country. It has been a part of our immigration policy since 1882, even before many government programs like Social Security in the 1930s and Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps began in the 1960s. When someone is deemed a public charge, this determination can be used to deny someone the ability to enter the country on a wide range of immigrant visas or reject their application for a green card once already in the country. But it should have no impact on the ability of a green card holder to naturalize. Many factors must be considered before someone is given a public charge determination. Current law designates individuals as public charge only if they receive government cash assistance like SSI and TANF, or temporary assistance for needy families, or if they live in government-paid long-term care, for example, in nursing homes. Ultimately, however, the government must look at the totality of an immigrant's circumstance before making a public charge determination. So why the sudden interest in this public charge now? In January 2017, there was a leaked executive order from the Trump administration that aimed to expand public charge determination in order to demonize immigrants who use government-funded benefits. This executive order was never signed, and instead of going through the Congress to try to change policies around public charge, the administration instead put pressure on U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to draft regulation to overhaul the system. They resorted to this backdoor channel, knowing fully well that they would not get broad legislative or public support for their anti-immigrant proposal. In February and March of this year, there were two provisions of the regulation that were leaked to the public. A final version was released to OMB in March, and OMB is now in the process of reviewing this language, and once it is done, they will release it for public comment for a period of about 60 days. Once the comment period is over, the administration will be tasked with responding to the public's concerns before enacting the regulation. So what does the latest leaked draft of this regulation tell us? So just a reminder to folks, the final regulation has not yet been released. And while we wait for the final language, advocates have begun analyzing who could potentially be on the chopping block on this leaked data. The following are the programs that were listed in the latest leaked version. The items in bold are what we already know were included in the current law. The items not in bold are new programs that this new regulation may consider for public charge determination. So for example, things as mentioned earlier, cash assistance and publicly funded long-term care have already been included, but newer benefits that may be under attack are a number of healthcare programs, nutrition programs like SNAP or food stamps, state and local programs, housing and energy assistance, earned income tax credit. This also includes a number of benefits received by dependents, including U.S. citizen children. So this is really very alarming for many mixed status families whose parents may be immigrants, but whose children are actually U.S. citizens. The following are benefits that may be excluded based on the recent leaked draft. So we have earned benefits connected to work or military service, Medicare, emergency disaster assistance, government student loans, and K-12 benefits, including Head Start. One thing we wanted to highlight is that this regulation does have some limitations. We currently have immigration laws in place around public charge. While this regulation may define certain provisions and the scope, it cannot change the law itself. For example, certain groups such as refugees, asylum seekers, victims of trafficking must be excluded from public charge determination. This regulation can do nothing to change that. For many Southeast Asian refugees that came into the country decades ago, if they were to come into the country now, they would not be turned away or labeled a public charge despite the use of government benefits. The next few slides will focus specifically on the impacts within the Asian American community, who come from a unique refugee background, but who continue to set up roots in the country and support newer family members to come into the country as immigrants. As mentioned earlier, Southeast Asian Americans who came into the U.S. as refugees and benefited from government assistance should not be impacted by this regulation. Those who will be impacted the most are newer, low-income immigrants who primarily come into the country on family-based visa sponsorship. In 2016, an average of 92% of Southeast Asian immigrants who obtained a green card were able to come into the U.S. on a family visa. That's almost 45,000 individuals. That does not even count others who may still be waiting to come into the United States to reunite with a loved one. Thousands of Southeast Asian immigrant families could potentially be impacted by this regulation. Additionally, here's some data on Southeast Asian community members who rely on benefits such as public health insurance and food stamps. Note, although we are unable to identify what proportion of these individuals came as refugees versus more recent immigrants who would be impacted by public charge, We know that the Southeast Asian American community in general relies heavily on these benefits to thrive and to help their family and community members thrive as well. And for Southeast Asian Americans who came into the country as refugees and are waiting to reunite with their loved ones, it is important to express opposition against this regulation that now targets others in their families and their communities. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Monica, who will talk a little bit more about the national campaign around public charge and also discuss some ways that you could be plugged in if you're interested.
Thank you, Katrina. So let's talk about how can we fight for our families in regard to this proposed regulation. And so there is a national campaign that's happening. It is Protecting Immigrant Families, a national campaign advancing our future. And so SEARAC is an active member of the PIS campaign, and it is co-chaired by the National Immigrant Law Center and the Center for Law and Social Policy. So this campaign brings together leading advocates for immigrants, children, education, health, anti-hunger, and anti-poverty groups, as well as faith leaders, to defend against threats and to lay the foundation for a more productive national dialogue about our immigrant tradition and our country's future. And so we are working closely with the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum, as well as the Association of Asian Pacific Community Health Organizations to mobilize our API communities, and SEARAC has really taken the lead on mobilizing the Southeast Asian communities. And so here's what we want you to consider. We want you to consider joining us to uplift Southeast Asian American stories in opposition to this proposed rule. And so what we're looking for is, one, we want to get a minimum of 1,000 individual and organizational comments, a minimum. If we can do well above that, that would be amazing. And the second thing we'd like to see is really get a minimum, again, just minimum of 5 Southeast Asian impact stories. And so for the stories, what we're looking at is if you could share stories on how you and your family have benefited from accessing public benefits, or for people who will potentially have to decide between continuing enrollment in health or nutrition programs or other programs, or obtaining a permanent lawful status for themselves or a family member. And also, if you know any immigrants who could talk about their previous experience receiving benefits and community providers who could address the experiences of families they know, that would be helpful as well. I think it's important to note that, again, one, these are minimum, and two, this public charge comment strategy is really a part of a larger campaign to really fight against the administration's attack on immigration. And so though we can't guarantee that our comments will stop the regulation from happening, it can stall and work to our benefit. For instance, one of the things the PIS campaign has been doing and other organizations have really been interacting and working with, meeting with OMB. And it looks like that it's being able to help us stall this regulation from coming out. So we expected this to come out sometime in April, and it didn't happen. And now we're in May, it still hasn't happened. And so it looks like, again, the strategy of putting pressure and having these meetings is actually working. So the comment process is, again, a way that we can really fight back and let the administration know that we are standing up for our families. And so here's what you can do to take action. So as Katrina mentioned, the regulation is not released. And so we can't submit comments until the public charge rule is actually published. And so we expect it to be a 30 to 60-day comment period. We were looking at 60 in the beginning, but it could be as low as 30. So what we're thinking about is trying to get as many comments as we can within the first 30 days after it's released. And we want to make sure that our communities are educated and prepared to take action. And because we really believe that an educated community is an empowered community. And so some of the ways that you can take action is by signing on to our sign-on letter, submitting personalized comments, and I want to stress personalized, because what we want to think about is not just sending the same comment to OMB. We really want them to see how diverse our community is and the benefit that public benefits has been having in their ability to thrive and to grow in this country. We want you to definitely consider sharing your story or letting someone else know about this campaign so they can share their stories as well, and also engage on social media. So when you start seeing some of the shareables in this webinar, share this information as much as you can. And so what do we do while we wait? So we've been waiting. And in the meantime, what would be really helpful to stay engaged and to stay plugged in into what's happening is to join SEARAC's listserv. We're going to constantly provide you with information and updates as much as necessary. We won't overwhelm you, but we will definitely give you the things that you need to know. You can join the PIF campaign listserv. They have some amazing resources. They've done a wonderful job on organizing and updating resources. And so we also want you to think about helping us spread the word by educating your communities, your families, your friends. So this webinar is recorded, and we're going to share it live via social media later this week. But what I really want you to think about is, as much as SEARAC is a national organization, and we really want to make sure we're educating our communities, we want you to play a part in that too. And so we will make sure you have all the resources that you need to also be the messenger and take action in this campaign. And finally, we're asking as an organization for you to make a personal commitment to get others to take part in this campaign. And so, you know, at the end of the year, a lot of organizations are often asking for donations or something to give to help the organization continue to run. And so sometimes people have it and sometimes they don't. This is a really low list. We're just asking for a commitment to get at least 10 people. For some, it could be 100 people, that when this is released, that you would commit to get that many people to sign on or to submit a comment that will help us reach our goal to fight for our families and communities. And finally, some of those resources that I was talking about, you can actually go to NILC's website. They have an info sheet and guidance about talking with immigrant families. Their talking points and fact sheets you can access from the PIF campaign. APIHF has a fact sheet as well. And so all these resources can be accessed in the webinar control panel. And so I think we're going to skip the poll right now, but we're going to go ahead and see if there are any questions that we can answer. So just give us a couple seconds to see if we have any questions, and we'll get right back to it. Katrina, one of the questions I have is, how does this impact those who are undocumented?
So this public charge regulation primarily impacts those in the country who are already here on valid immigrant visas and who might want to shift or attain a green card at some point in the future, or those that live outside of the country waiting to come into the country on a valid immigrant visa. For the most part, a lot of the public benefits mentioned earlier, undocumented immigrants, you know, they already don't have access to them. So those that will really be primarily impacted are immigrants already living in the country or trying to come into the country. Documented immigrants that say, you know, at some point in the future, they may want to access or are able to achieve a path to getting a green card. This may hurt them sometime in the near future, but for now, the main constituency that we're concerned with in terms of impact are those here on valid immigrant visas.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks? We apologize. We are having extreme technical difficulties, but we will plan on sending out this voice recording along with the webinar slides. And I think with that, we'll just have to end it here. We're so sorry, folks. We're not quite sure what happened with our technology. But if folks have any follow-up questions for me and Monica, Monica's email is on the final slide, monica@searac.org. You can also contact me at katrina@searac.org. And we will be following up with folks with updates through our listserv and our social media page. So thanks everyone for joining today, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, bye.